This is Rise. Let's lock in with the goal of changing one life at a time. Yours. Together, let us rise up, inspire, strengthen, and elevate our minds. It's time to rise on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, my name is Dr. Saran Heron, and welcome to Rise. Today we are going to talk about bullying, how to address the problem, and offer helpful advice to victims of bullying. It is important to know your self-worth. Pat Wilson is a retired teacher, counselor, and a writer. She earned her Bachelor of Education at the University of Alberta in Canada, completed postgraduate courses towards her master's in counseling. Her career in teaching and counseling began in the 1968, which she did for 40 years. She has decades of experience with children of all ages. She taught K to grade 12, and raising her children have steadily increased her passion for supporting children, especially those who are experiencing anxiety, depression, as well as bullying. She is here to share how to develop useful skills to address bullying, share her experiences and expertise, as well as advice for individuals and understand source that may contribute to bullying. Pat Wilson, welcome to Rise here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you for inviting me to share the little bit that I know. I really appreciate the interview.
So bullying is not a topic that's not familiar to us. But speak to us about the types of bullying that students may encounter.
Well, the most common ones are boy to boy and girl to girl. There can be teacher bullying. There can be parental bullying. Like when you get into the junior high and high school levels, they can actually get into the gang bullying. But when you're talking about the younger children, the boy-to-boy bullying is generally fist fighting and calling names. The girl-to-girl bullying is more subtle and yet very serious, because what they do is they isolate the girl that they want to target, and they can leave her with absolutely zero sense of belonging. So even though there's no broken bones, the pain is quite strong.
Now, you are a retired teacher and a counselor. For those who are listening that may not be familiar with that role, share with us, what do you do as a counselor? What are some of your responsibilities?
Well, generally, when you're working in a school setting, the referrals come from the teachers, the administrators, sometimes the parents, and sometimes, if we're lucky, the student himself or herself asks for a counseling session. I do find that I generally have to tell that old joke about how many counselors does it take to change a light bulb. And then you say only one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
I agree.
And very often that is the difficulty when you're working in a setting where the children aren't coming on their own volition. They are being told that they need to see a counselor.
Now, how challenging is it for you as a counselor? I mean, you're dealing with different age groups, different types of issues that may present themselves that you as a counselor have to work with the students to work it out and get them to a better place where change has occurred.
Well, I find the challenges most to be the setting, because very often in a setting of a school, there still is a negative attachment to going to see the counselor. And very often the time restraints are tough, because just when you're about to get into an open-hearted discussion, the school bell rings and they have to go back to class. So those, I'd say, and of course the no buy-in is probably the most serious limitation in that.
Now, share with us your experience with counseling with kids. Like, how rewarding is it for you when you know you counseled a child or a high school student and you could see the progress, you could see the changes that are being made?
Well, I have taught and counseled students over a period of 40 years, full-time over 30 years.
Wow.
And I have two children and 5 grandchildren, so it is a never-ending process. It truly is difficult to assess real success, but I do have contact with students that I taught and counseled 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
Wonderful.
So you form a relationship, and it's always wonderful to connect.
Wonderful. Now, do you have a particular story that you could share, or a particular session with someone who's a bully and advice that you had to give them?
Generally, I didn't have clients that were the bullies, because they rarely were sent to me. They would come on a administrative referral, and there was a new surge in online bullying. And so what we would do is we would bring in the affected student and the bully. Very often the actions did stop from the bully, but very often the intimidation continued. It was almost like an energetic intimidation, especially with the girls, because they would do that isolation, sort of leaving the child out. So it remained quite hurtful. So as far as really spending time changing a bully, I would give them my understandings and listen to them. But very often they modeled it from being bullied.
Agreed.
And so I more worked with the victims than with the bullying.
Now, we know that bullying, there's always a source, right, that behavior stemmed from. Share some of your experience with us in terms of source. Like, what was the main cause why these individuals encountered the behaviors that they did?
Well, I think the bullying is modeled. And I did find that most of the students who became bullies were bullied at home by either parents or siblings or by other source. And if you could reach their empathic understanding of how it felt when they got bullied and ask the question, why are you passing it forward? Right. They would sometimes think it through for sure.
Now, what tools and resources or techniques, I know we're talking about bullying, but you also have a passion for counseling, individuals that may encounter anger or depression. What are some tools that you have used or techniques that were helpful for those areas?
Probably the most effective technique I found that I've learned through my career is I actually use Reiki or any relaxation technique to get the student into a relaxed state where they would be willing to use their own imagination. And I would ask them to go back in time using sort of visualizing a photograph album and become younger and younger, and go back as a confident and competent person, like when they were really, really, really feeling good, finding that part of themselves. And that would be the part that they move back in time and find out where that anger, that depression, that sadness came from. And then they could find the little you and the little person inside them, their inner child. And then imaginatively, the observer would hold space for that little one to express the emotion that's repressed. I think the biggest thing that I've learned as the most important is to allow them space to release either anger or fear or sadness or whatever it was, because very often our physical, mental, and emotional problems source from repressed emotions, often in the 0 to 7 range. And let them just hold space for them to spend time with their inner child. And when they're ready, invite them back into this time and space and listen to what they had to say and get them to embrace that child and squeeze their body quite hard so that they're actually dealing with mental, emotional, but also in their physical, because it's all fine and well to learn concepts in your mind, but very often they have to learn to get it in their physical being. And you just let them know that their inner child is safe and courageous.
Wonderful advice. Very useful tips. You are listening to Rise on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Saran Heron, and today we're talking with Pat Wilson, who's a retired teacher, counselor, and a writer. She earned her Bachelor's of Education at the University of Alberta in Canada, completed postgraduate courses towards her master's in counseling. Her career in teaching and counseling began in 1968, which she has done for 40 years. She has decades of experience. She has her with children from K to grade 12 and raising her children has also increased her passion for supporting children, especially those who are experiencing anxiety, depression, as well as bullying. She is here to share how to develop useful skills to addressing bullying, share her experience and expertise, as well as advice for those individuals and understand sources that can contribute to bullying. Now, Pat, we've been talking, and I know I've asked you a series of questions about how an individual may feel, like if you're feeling helpless and you're feeling like you want to harm yourself. What are some, speak to us about those type of experiences that you have experienced.
I think my most memorable experience was a high school individual who had tried to end her life and was sent to the nearby city and was hospitalized and then sent into the counseling room to see the school counselor. A very, very big emotional experience, not only for her, but for me, because I could feel the darkness of her depression, which was very, very real. Because when a child feels that they don't belong and they feel that they have no hope to hang on to, they will often, in that emotional state, attempt to end their life. So I was working with this student, and I just asked some questions. I didn't argue with their decision because it's really tough to argue with an adolescent because then they dig in their defense mechanisms. So I didn't argue with them. I asked them really practical questions. I would say, what is your view of life after death? And they would answer. In this case, there was no belief of anything following. So I said, well, what will tomorrow look like if you follow through with your decision today? And there was a dramatic pause because I don't think that thought had entered her mind. Yeah. And then I said, well, if you decide to do this, what is the rush? Why today? Mm-hmm. Isn't there something in this life, this experience of life that you have, that you think might be worth living for as a goal? Like, wouldn't you like to do something before you decide to end your life? And I actually had a number of students had jars that they were saving their money to go to Paris or do something that was on their bucket list. Right. And I said, and then after you do that and you decide to end your life, well, at least you know that you've had a good time. You've done something kind of fun in this life. And I'm really, really happy that none of my students, I don't know how you say it, but they didn't end their lives. And when they got through that tumultuous adolescence where their emotions were driving their thoughts, by setting a goal in the future, they would go through that chaotic time. And I know them as adults, and they're fine and dandy. Like, it does settle down somewhat.
Right, just a time in their life. Just a time in their life exactly. that they were going through something, whatever it was. Now, for those individuals who have experience in bullying, what would you want to say to them? They've experienced it or they're experiencing, either way.
Well, I think of a kid, grade 8, a strong-looking boy who came in and he was being terribly bullied, mostly jealousy because his father was rich, probably. I'm not sure. Right. But the boys were really on him. And so I asked him to use his imagination as well. And I asked him to imagine, I said, what is the most powerful, strong animal that you can imagine? Well, he chose a panther, a black panther. And I said, just take a moment. And you generally arouse the imagination through the senses. So I'd say, can you see the panther in your mind? And he described it. What are the colors of his eyes? What does his hair look like? And then I'd say, is there any sound that you can hear? And he could hear that sort of rumbling of a panther. And I went through every one of the senses so that he really could truly imagine that this black panther was in the room beside him. And I said, how about if that animal is truly your protector? Like, why not imagine it? I believe that Einstein said that our imagination was a greater gift than our intellect. I'm not sure what the resource is, but I do think he said it. But it gave him something that gave him a different energy.
Right.
So I said, when you're feeling unsure of yourself, imagine this power animal, invisible to everybody else, beside you when you're walking down the hallway. And he never was bullied again. And so I think that is really a good thing to do one-on-one. But I also believe it's important that they talk to someone.
Agree. Yeah.
Talk to an adult they can trust, talk to their best friend, and develop the courage to stand up somehow.
And even to their parents, to their
exactly,
parents.
Absolutely.
Tell your mom, tell your dad, tell someone, like you said. Now, for those listening to the program and their children may be being bullied at school, and they feel like this is a never-ending cycle, especially for those that may have changed different schools or different neighborhood, different area, what advice can you offer to that? Well,
speaking to your child, and more importantly, listening without a comment, like from an adult, from an older person, and ask them what they might be able to do, what would make them feel safer. I think it's all about safety. I think that
yes,
the whole thing is about safety.
Yes,
and if they could somehow face their fears and understand that they're still safe, connecting to others, speaking to others, and healthy anger. Like anger is a very maligned emotion in my understanding. I think that anger expressed in an unhealthy way is not only harmful, it's kind of dangerous. But if you can use your anger at a situation to develop your courage, fear and anger, I find, even personally, fear and anger cannot reside in the body at the same time.
Right.
And I have used it myself when I took my pilot's license and I was afraid to fly solo. And luckily I managed to get so darned angry that I got out there and I flew that son of a gun as though I had been a pilot for 30 years. And it was because I allowed myself to use the anger
as you feel,
to energize my active emotion. Because fear is a passive emotion. You're scared, you freeze, you run away. Anger is the action emotion. It's the energizing emotion. And so if they can learn to find healthy ways, I think that can help.
You are listening to Rise on the Voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Saran Heron, and today we're talking with Pat Wilson, who's a retired teacher, counselor, and a writer. She earned her Bachelor of Education at the University of Alberta in Canada, completed postgraduate courses towards her Master's in Counseling. Her career in teaching and counseling began in 1968, which she did for 40 years. She has decades of experience with children of all ages. She's taught K to grade 12, and raising her children has steadily increased her passion for supporting children, especially those who are experiencing anxiety, depression, as well as bullying. She is here to share how to develop useful skills to address bullying, share her experiences and expertise, as well as advise for individuals and understand sources that can contribute to one's bullying. Now, Pat, you wrote My Magical Nightmare. Speak to us about this book and how you believe it could help develop skills to handle bullying as well as anxiety.
Well, I wrote My Magical Nightmare because my granddaughter was having nightmares all the time and waking up quite scared. And truthfully, how you stand on others' shoulders. I had read a magazine article probably 25 years prior in Psychology Today, and it was about how to change your dreams to be more positive. And the suggestion was that if you wake up from a nightmare and go through the day, you're not going to have a good day. And the article suggested that you change the ending of the dream. so that you were in some way the winner. So I asked my granddaughter, I told her about that before we went to sleep. And when she awakened, I said, well, did you have a nightmare? And she said, no, but there was a horse. My other grandma's horse was beside me this morning. And I thought, whoa, that's fantastic. Mm. So that was the inspiration for my magical nightmare. So it's this mare that comes to a person at night and helps them with their dreams, with changing at the end. And in that book, I give that practical skill set that I just described to you. So she says, if you wake from a dream and feel bad at the end, you can call me for help. Use your mind to pretend. And then here's how I've learned to call her. I make pictures with my thoughts. I imagine how I feel with her, and I practice lots and lots. I see her standing by me. My fingers brush her sides. I smell her warmth. I hear her neigh, and I feel safe inside. And it goes on to the fact that everybody can do this. Right. And I have had a number of parents, like I've sold over 3,000 books of that one.
Wonderful.
And they've stopped me on the street and said that I've actually, they don't get interrupted by their little kid anymore.
They go to sleep.
And it's not about just, and it's not about just a mare. Like other teachers have used the books in class, and they say the children come up with dragons and any source like transformers, anything that represents power to them, they can develop the same scenario with, much like that, the boy and the panther.
Wonderful, Pat.
So that was the inspiration. I had a great illustrator. March Hutchinson is the illustrator of that book, and just a remarkable illustrator. So I was lucky to have that.
Amazing. Now, what message do you want to leave with our listeners as we're going to wrap up the program today with dealing with bullying and how to address that? What advice can you offer? I know you've gave several examples.
I think just find help and know that there is support for you. There is always support. And it may find help and really understand that we can change. We can become stronger. We can become courageous. We can face our fears. And I would say that is the message is you can actually, it's a skill. We don't come into this world. We're not born
we have to learn them.
Courage.
Yeah, we have to learn them.
We have to meet our fear.
Yes. Now, how can listeners connect with you to get your book or just to have you on their podcast?
Well, my books I have a website. It's amazingbooks.ca is my website. And also they are on amazon.ca. I find that it's best to find them through PR Wilson, but they can actually connect that way. Or if they want to email me direct to it, it would be info@amazingbooks.ca.
Now, thank you for being here, Pat. Thank you for being here, Pat.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. I just want to quickly warm welcome to International Prayer Institute Evangelist Camille James. I know you're listening on today's program. Can you offer some advice based on today's topic?
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. It's a great blessing to be here. We see as the years go by quickly, many things has changed in our society. Situations that we felt only affected adults are now seen affecting our young ones. Our children are placed in hurtful and harmful situations in the home, at school, and even on their jobs. Many will never know what real childhood feels and looks like. I pray that lessons and encouragement will begin first in the home. And if the home is not together, someone will just reach out and ask for help. Asking for help is very, very important because our children deserves it. Blessings always.
I appreciate you both taking the time to speak with us. I thank you so much. I'm Dr. Saran Heron. It's important not to ignore bullying, but to identify the signs, get proper help, and rise above it. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Rise, available wherever you listen to podcasts and always right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.